3D printing Warhammer terrain that is meant for FDM on a resin printer? Yeah, of course. Printing anything for FDM printers has its challenges, and one of those is simply not having supported models for resin printers. Hey, I am Nathan, and welcome to my little slice of YouTube. And with that, I sometimes get people approach me to showcase their models they have sculpted. And one of those places was Celsiman Studios, a small Australian business specializing in 3D printed terrain. They also just ran a successful Kickstarter called Darkhive. I got sent a different set back in May of this year, and Celsiman Studios has been so patient with me, so thank you. I'm not going to lie to you though, I had some problems, and it was all my fault. With not placing the models correctly, led to some print failures. I took a super lazy approach to it, and I figured they are straight pieces, so why not just have them straight on from the build plate? And though I have seen it done before, the way I did it was not the right way. See, there was simply just too much force on the FEP sheet, and it made the supports rip off the terrain and cause this elephant foot. Basically, the edges bowed and ruined it. It wasn't a complete loss. I can always use them for other things later, but I feel like it was a lesson I needed to learn. Cleaning the vat with a little ISO just to remove the residue, you can see here. I rarely use ISO to clean the vat, but in this case it was needed before I could start the next print. So back to that lesson. What did I learn from this? Orientation is key, so I had to go back and change them to a 40-degree rotation. This should limit the amount of force on the FEP sheet. Less suction force will allow the supports to do their thing and support. And tried the auto supports again, this time also making sure there was extra strength with bracing between the supports. Oh, and topping off the resin before heading to bed. This time they printed. The supports held up well, and the edges looked to have stayed straight. Last thing I wanted was not being able to have the terrain sitting flush with the table. It was also very satisfying having the first plate peel away from the build plate all in one piece. I still needed to print off the pillars, doors, and some walls. Since it was the first lot of terrain, I didn't really have a plan for how many parts I would need, so I thought if I could get enough to at least build a small room section, I can build from there. Next up, washing the first prints. Again, I went with methylated spirits. It is just far cheaper than isopropyl alcohol here in Australia. I only tend to have a small amount of ISO on hand at any given time. Washing times can vary, but since these models were not hollowed, I will just use them in the standard 5 minutes I've always done. Support removal was just as satisfying as ever. Dunking the parts into hot water while removing the supports just makes it a lot easier on you. Supports just peel away. Test fitting some parts is a little nerve-wracking because I thinned them out by around 80%. I had hope that I didn't screw up somewhere along the line. The big thing about printing a lot of parts is that it is easy to lose track of everything. Parts are all dried, so it is finally time to cure all the terrain pieces. I had used clear resin because I ran out of the grey, so I wasn't fussed about yellowing here. I mean, I was just going to undercoat them anyway. I don't mind clear resin, but it's a little difficult to show on camera. Painting. Out of everything I did with this project, painting took me the longest, and it had nothing to do with it being difficult to paint, more so it was me. Have you ever sat down to paint and you have a hard time picturing the end result? I needed some test pieces and I wanted something that was quick but did not look like it was rushed. My first thought was that slap chop thing people do on miniatures, priming in black, and of course my airbrush is not working. Cleaned it using the ultrasonic cleaner. It was just easier to grab a rattle can of black and then spray it with grey. Then I dry brushed it on white. I was a little heavy with the dry brush. I think I just had too much paint on the brush. I'm not used to dry brushing too often. This time I had my airbrush in working order, sprayed it with blue contrast from Citadel. I liked it, but also thought it was a little simple. This is when I tried some other techniques. The other idea was to have it look like a medical station abandoned for a long time. My first attempt looked not that great, but maybe my painting skills just held me back here. Next I thought, what if I kept the same contrast look but added rust to that? Thinking more of a Space Hulk left drifting out in space. The rust came out a lot better here, but I wasn't sure if I had enough dirty down rust to do all the pieces, so I went back to that slappy choppy thing. This time I went with a red glow coming from the ground. So I got some red contrast paint and thinned it down with a little bit of water. It went through the airbrush pretty well. I usually use thinners, but I had run out by this time. Once something works, it is so much fun to paint. I ended up ordering a new airbrush that should be here for the next project. This red armor glow is looking really cool. I tried to make it look like it's reaching up, trying to claw at the light, making sure to make each piece line up when I put it together. So to do that, I would just make the corners always go up to a point, but in the middle I would have a bit of artistic free reign. I was running out of the blue contrast paint, and you could imagine I was getting a little worried. It is not a problem for those at home, but wanting to get a video out, it can be very stressful when paint runs out. But I ended up having enough. I am going to say it, I love the way these turned out. I don't usually like what I do when it comes to painting, but this came out the way I thought in my head. I will have to go back and try my hand at some OSL. Now they are painted, I had to try and build a scene. They connected together great. That was a relief that it all fits well. Using some of the true scale Terminators I printed from a previous video, you can check that up right here. Saucerman Studios did an amazing job with this terrain, and I can't wait to be able to start printing their Dark Hive terrain. I liked it that much that I ended up supporting the Kickstarter myself. Next time, I would like to see if I can build more vertical to make larger spaces, or even a diorama at some time. Either way, I'm glad I took the plunge and printed the terrain and got over some of those hurdles along the way. Thanks to Saucerman Studios, and thank you for watching. If you are interested in some more 3D printing, check out these last videos I did here.